The final report, which was presented, came in a format which had 4 parts. Part 1, factual information. Part 2, analysis of the factual information. Part 3 were the conclusions, which includes the findings, the causes, and all contributory factors. And part 4, the safety recommendations. The flight data and cockpit voice recorder were then transported to the Avionic Flight Decoding Center in Xi'an, China, from the 12th September to 22nd September 2025. Now, Avionic is the Aviation Industry Corporation of China. The aircraft is a Chinese aircraft. They were the manufacturers. They had the software and the hardware capable of decoding and giving us the data from the flight data recorder. So we had to go to them. We went before the flight to see what the pilots had been doing. And it's on record that their last 3 flights before the subject flight, the same crew had flown all the 3 flights before on the same helicopter. On the 2nd of August, they came from their base in Takrady to Accra. It was a Medivac flight, 1 hour long. On the 3rd of August, the following day, they did a flight from Accra to Cape Coast back to Accra. 1 hour, 20 minutes. It was also a medical evacuation flight, Medivac. On the 4th, they were tasked to go fly Accra to Salman, back to Accra. That was a 2 hour 30 flight. That was a bullion flight, cargo flight. On the 5th of August, they rested. Now, it helps to say here that in Ghana Air Force, their flying limitations for the crew, you have 10 hours per week maximum, 62 hours maximum per month. Before flight, it's also accepted that if you've had a rest of 8 hours, you've had enough rest and you can go to work. They had in excess of 24 hours rest. On Wednesday, 6th August, the crew for the Z9 aircraft, call sign, ISCAP, Hotel Romeo, India, planned to execute the task order for the Ministry of Defense. The flight was scheduled to depart at 8 a.m. with an estimated en route time of 50 minutes. The captain delayed the flight due to adverse weather in Accra, Kumasi, and Obuasi. The weather improved about an hour later. So, takeoff ended up at 12 minutes, 14 seconds after 9 a.m. Throughout the flight, the altitude changed to avoid low clouds. Now let me explain why this was so. The flight started out being conducted under visual flight rules. Now, if you're flying under visual flight rules, what it means is you're using visual references to navigate. It's a normal way of flying. So they were using visual cues to navigate to go to Obuasi. And so they had to stay away from cloud in contact with the ground. So as the cloud base changed, they changed their altitude. Where they needed to avoid, they would avoid. I'd like you to take a look at these 2 pictures. Now, first of all, these pictures were taken in the environs of where the accident took place. Take note, it wasn't taken on the day of the accident, but it's just representative. The picture on the left shows the morning weather and shows you the visibility, gives you some idea of the visibility on the day. The picture on the right is taken from the same place, looking at the same area, and you can clearly see that you can make out the ridges in the terrain over there. And it's noteworthy that on the day of the flight, this visibility you are seeing that I'm telling you, you can't even see that as you can see. On the day, the visibility was much worse. From eyewitness accounts, the visibility was down to close to 200 meters at some point. This also shows a picture of actual weather from a passenger who was on board the aircraft, just to give you an idea. The weather in the southern Ghana was poor on the day, which delayed departure for about an hour. In Accra, conditions were misty, with visibility of about 5 to 7 kilometers and very low clouds, starting at only 700 to 1,100 feet above the ground. While the situation improved slightly later in the morning, the early hours were dominated by haze and overcast skies. In Kumasi, the weather was worse, with drizzle reducing visibility to around 4 kilometers and heavy, low clouds sitting just 600 to 900 feet above the ground. Only Accra and Kumasi Aerodrome were available. Only Accra and Kumasi Aerodrome weather were available. There was no formal information on the weather available to the pilots along the flight route. Witnesses reported poor visibility due to fog and rain at Brofuyedru and its environs. Environmental conditions in the Dampier Forest Reserve and its rugged terrain of hills, mountains, created conditions such that over such rugged terrain, you can have turbulence, downdraft, and other phenomena. Now, to look at this is what we're talking about. This is a known aviation phenomena when you have such rugged territory. And what ends up happening is turbulent wind currents occur usually around ridgelines, mountains, and hills, and can generate sink rates in excess of 1,000 feet a minute in moderate wind conditions. These sink conditions can often exist well above the barrier that induces the eddies. We assessed the aircraft to see if it was fit for purpose. The helicopter entered the Ghana Air Force Service in May 2015, having been manufactured in 2012. And it reached its 10-year service threshold on 18th May 2025. Aircrafts have periodic checks to make sure that they're fit for service. The Air Force has 25-hour checks, 50-hour checks, and 100-hour checks. The 10-year check for the helicopter is what was mandated for this helicopter. Now, as is usual, an operator, in this case Ghana Air Force, requested from the manufacturer an extension. And it's normal, happens in civil flying, happens with any type of flying. The manufacturer gave a 90-day extension to 18th August 2025. And basically, the helicopter met all the basic safety requirements. That notwithstanding, it sort of met a 100-hour check. So the Air Force also did a 100-hour check on the helicopter before the flight. The aircraft on the day was declared serviceable and duly signed off by both the engineers and the captain. The flight data report indicates that the helicopter was in good working condition. The helicopter, however, did not have some avionic safety enhancements. As I said before, the aircraft was serviceable and airworthy. The additional safety equipment that the helicopter did not have were things like the helicopter terrain awareness system or the enhanced ground proximity warning system, as you may choose, advanced navigation with terrain mapping, an automatic flight control system. And I would say that these safety equipment would have enhanced situational awareness. For instance, it didn't have an autopilot. That's advanced, the automatic flight control system, so that the crew had to manually fly the plane. So it sort of increases workload. Typically, you want to have a plane that has an autopilot. All the civil planes use autopilots, and the workload on the pilots is very low. It gives you the chance to do things and to think easily, and so on and so forth. Despite all this, the aircraft was in a good condition to fly and met all safety requirements. Now to the sequence of events. The flight departed Accra under visual flight rules in marginal weather. The flight to Brofuyedru was uneventful. Brofuyedru is approximately 90 miles from Accra, about 10 miles from Obuasi. As the flight approached Obuasi, visibility deteriorated rapidly due to mist and low clouds. At 9:56, the crew entered IMC, which is Instrument Meteorological Conditions. To the layman, it is they flew into clouds because they no longer could stay away from the clouds, so they flew into clouds and transitioned to IFR. Now, IFR is Instrument Flight Rules. So what it means is they now transitioned from navigating using visual cues to now navigation solely on the aircraft's instruments. The crew then initiated a climb to cross terrain that they were aware of. They initiated the climb to cross the terrain. Seconds before impact, the crew stated that they could see the high ground below, so they had gone over it. Suddenly thereafter, the helicopter that was flying up without any change in its power or in the pitch, which we use to go up and down, suddenly lost height and impacted a ridgeline at about 1,370 feet above sea level. And this was about 6.5 miles from the destination, and this happened at 9:58. Is what the planned track had been. The purple line is what the aircraft actually flew. And that took place because it was avoiding clouds and so on and ended up where it was. Now to our findings. The helicopter was airworthy, but it lacked additional safety enhancements. For instance, the terrain awareness warning system. Now, you know, the terrain awareness warning system, for instance, is predictive. So what it does is it tells you, warns you, it gives you a better picture of the situation and puts the pilots in a better, it gives them, puts them in a position to make better judgments, to be able to see everything and be able to foretell if there are any things that could possibly create a problem. But they lacked the additional safety enhancements required for the weather phenomenon over that terrain. There was adverse weather, there was limited visibility, there was rising rugged terrain. With this terrain induced complicating factors, and there were no ground-based navigational route aids en route. The investigation would like to say that from everything they gathered, the emergency response was very timely. The fact that the first responders managed to get to the site in about 2 hours was remarkable, because the terrain has very steep slopes. It was raining, it was slippery. So it wasn't the easiest thing to do. When we went to the site, it was also raining and it was very slippery. And we struggled using sticks and everything to try to get up there. So looking at everything, we would say very confidently that the emergency response was very timely. The investigation determined that the accident was caused by the sudden loss of altitude and lift due to downdraft. This loss of altitude without change in power or pitch altitude is consistent with downdraft associated with changing environmental conditions over high terrain. Yes, we listened to the CVR. We listened to it several times. And it is part of what informed us of what caused the accident. And for modernization of the fleet, we think it should be done immediately. Tomorrow is not fast enough. As soon as the country can afford and do it, we should do it, because it would help the Air Force with this core mandate, part of which is to fly dignitaries all over the country. And I think we owe it to ourselves as a nation to make sure that we have aircraft fit for purpose, aircraft that are the highest technology, to make sure that everything is very, very safe. Yeah. To the sudden loss of altitude, I'm sure it was in one of the slides. When you over rugged territory, that's over terrain, dependent on the steepness and so on and so forth, it's very easy to have turbulence. It's caused by eddies and rotors. It's an aviation phenomena, right? And you have updrafts, you have downdrafts. And even interestingly, even above the ridge, you can still have downdrafts coming. And it's not, it's a phenomena, it's an aviation phenomena that unfortunately they fell into. They were very unfortunate, but it's a phenomenon that they fell into. And because there cannot be any other reason for that sudden loss of altitude for a plane climbing with power, with a pitch attitude, right? Because you see, the flight data recorder, to just help you understand the whole thing, the flight data recorder records the last 10 hours of a flight. The cockpit voice recorder records the last 2 hours of a flight. The flight data recorder, this particular one of this helicopter, records 93 parameters every second. The 93 parameters is made up of 48 analog parameters and 45 switch positions. So, looking at the flight data report, you know where all the switch positions are, you know what the height of the plane was, you know the exact position you know it time bound. So, what we are saying is from informed data. Thank you once again for your questions. I would like to presume that when you say emergency landing, you mean a diversion, because an emergency landing is when something goes wrong with the plane, because nothing ever went wrong with the plane. The decision to continue or to do an intermediate landing is the discretion of the captain. The captain was confident that he didn't need to do it. That is why he didn't do it. in terms of the additional avionics, right? I believe the question was, if they had it, would it have prevented the accident? Was that the question? Okay. All I would say is it could have prevented the accident because it would have put the pilots in a better situational awareness mode. And it would have put them in a much better place to have taken decisions which could possibly have avoided this. But let's not kid ourselves. Let me just say something. What they went through is the sort of thing that even the best anywhere would have struggled to get out of, using what they were, with the limited instrumentation and so on that they had. The instrumentation, the instrumentation was fit for everything, but what we are saying is, I guess it's like saying that more meat never spoils the soup. It's, if you have all these other enhancements, it really helps. The Air Force the Air Force would be happy to have these enhancements because they know what it would help them do, and it would make our dignitaries and so on much safer when they fly. So that is why we are recommending that. But it doesn't mean that the fact that those enhancements were not there, that is why the accident happened. No, it would be wrong to say so. That would be too far-fetched.